Julie, you shared a bit about the product, but I didn't know that you're actually such an experienced product designer. I'm very curious about your talk. You're going to speak also about user experience. And I think this is a topic that we can definitely learn from you here in Southeast Europe, because we're not, to be honest, we're not really good at that. So the stage is yours.
Okay, great. Oh, whoops. Okay, there it is. All right, thank you. So excited to be here in Romania. This is my first time here. And today I'll be talking about designing a product experience vision at scale. So I think Irina kind of went over my background, but just to highlight again, I live in San Francisco and I lead product design at Carta. And I also teach how designers can be influential in strategy through a community called Rethink. A little bit about Carta. If you guys don't know it, it's an equity platform for investors and companies and employees to manage that equity. So what that would look like is, for example, if you're a founder of a company and you want to raise money, you would use Carta as a software to manage your cap table, saying, oh, this is how much employees have versus investors have. Investors would use that platform to then manage their portfolio, so seeing all the different companies they invested in and also managing that relationship with LPs. And then for the employee experience, if you worked at a startup, you would get that private equity. So for me, I lead product design on the employee experience. And within the past years, Carta has grown really rapidly. So you can see our valuation here from Series Seed all the way to Series G now, around a like 7.4 billion valuation. So with growing really quickly, there comes things called growing pains as you scale. Now we have around a little under 2,000 employees, and a problem with scaling is you want to ship really fast, but that can be a challenge for the user experience. And what we found at Carta is, as we started to grow really rapidly, our product started to look like our org chart, where you'd have individual features and you'd have designers optimizing for that, but the end-to-end experience wasn't as cohesive, right? You're really shipping what your organization looked like, which is a problem. And I think the reason why this is a problem manifests in these two kind of cultural phenomenons of different processing. One is versioning, and the other one is visioning. So I want to talk about what the differences of those are. So versioning is how can we make incremental, really quick improvements to the product? It's oftentimes you're evaluating how fast can I build this? Can we ship this out the door very quickly and show value to the company that we're improving it? So it goes very quickly. But the con is sometimes that's not always the ideal end user experience. Maybe the better user experience is something that takes longer. And that brings me to visioning, which is a different process. Oftentimes, vision work can take 2 to 5 years. And it's really thinking about what is the ideal end-to-end user experience. And why is visioning so important to have as a cultural aspect in the company? It's because in a competitive market, the companies that dominate have the best user experience. They have an obsession with the customer. And companies can foster 2 types of loyalties with customers. One is transactional loyalty, and the one is emotional loyalty. And you'll see the best companies that are most memorable, that stand the test of time, are the ones that foster emotional loyalty. Transactional loyalty is, you go to a product to do some type of transaction or type of task. But emotional loyalty is something a lot different. Like when you go to Disney, you have an emotional feeling about such a delightful experience. Or when you try a Tesla, the first time you're trying an EV for the first time, it's such a magical experience. Or using kind of an Apple product. And because the best companies foster emotional loyalty, that's why visioning is so important, to think about what is that ideal customer experience. I think this slide got messed up, but basically this slide was supposed to be what exactly is a product experience vision. So vision is where your product experience is heading toward and what the impact is on the world. So vision is often the thing that gets people really excited in the room that want to join your product to build toward it. So at Carta, specifically our business vision is we want to create more owners. And then our product vision for employee, which is the part of the Carta where I work, is we want to help employees proactively manage that equity so they can build their personal wealth through ownership over time. And while this vision is really great and creates like a mission of where it is, it's only one sentence, and it doesn't really explain what is that story. And that's where it comes in the experience vision. So an experience vision actually visualizes that story of how a customer is impacted by your product experience in the future. So a really good example of this is Airbnb, which is a very design-centered type of company. And the CEO, Brian Chesky, he studied the work of like Walt Disney, and he would see how he would use something called storyboarding to tell the story of different Disney movies like Snow White and share the vision of these movies and get people to buy in. So he wanted to do the same thing with Airbnb. What would be the ideal experience an Airbnb customer would go through for a trip? And he hired someone for Pixar to kind of illustrate that story. And he used this story to really capture the hearts of all the different employees at Airbnb, that this is where we want to build toward. This is the delightful experience we want people to have when they use Airbnb. And what's great about a story is it's memorable and really captures the heart of people. Another reason why a product experience vision is useful is alignment. And this is very important at scale when you have multiple different teams. Instead of wanting to ship the org chart where people are doing different features, you want everyone to be building toward the same North Star of what is that ideal end-to-end experience. The second thing it allows you to do is also to think big, not like a versioning culture where you're thinking, what's the fastest, quickest way to do something, but what could be the best experience, or how can we even be bigger in the market or do something more grand? And then lastly, because you're thinking big, it creates that 11-star customer experience, where you're really thinking about what is that ideal journey to create that delight and emotional loyalty. So today, I kind of want to share with you my process that we used at Carta for designing an experience vision for your product. And I will say at Carta, this was really unique, because at the time, everyone was kind of in a versioning culture versus a visioning culture. So this is something that our employee platform team that was entirely new. It was uncharted territories, and we came up with this process. So the first thing you need is the right team. So we had kind of a tiger team of designers and product managers. So specifically, it was me, my design manager, a group product manager, another product manager on that platform to think through this vision work. Another thing we did to make sure that we're always in communication is we created a calendar event every single week so we could talk about the vision and move it forward with different agenda items. And this is the process that we ended up coming up with. So very high level, and I'll go through it later. First, you start with research to really understand the problem space. Second, you define what does success look like in that vision. Third one, ideate, think about a bunch of blue sky range of solutions of what that experience could be. Fourth, you want to evangelize that vision and show it to different stakeholders in that company and also get that executive buy-in. Fifth, we wanted to take in that feedback from stakeholders and also do some user testing to update it. And then last part of the process, how do you go from that vision to actually translating it into the company's roadmap? So first, I'll start with research. So we did a lot of research to understand the problem space, and that's really important to begin with. So some things we did was we looked at NPS feedback, so that's Net Promoter Score feedback. We also did a bunch of user interviews, looked at product analytics, also just looked at a lot of front-end tracking, like full story to check how people are using our platform today. And this is really important so you can understand what are kind of the top pain points that customers are experiencing. And then the next part is we also did a lot of customer analysis. So we wanted to see how do we stand in our customer experience compared to other people in the market. And this served to help us identify gaps in our current experience, but also serve as inspiration of, hey, I really like this about another product's experience, or I don't like this, and drawing inspiration of where we want to build toward. And then after all of that research, we created a deliverable called the user journey map. And if you don't know what that is, basically, you map out all the different steps that a customer would have to take from their end-to-end journey, all the different touch points in your product, and you map out what is their emotional experience at different points. Are they delighted? Are they feeling this process is really painful? And by synthesizing all our research into that, we could clearly see what is the current experience today, where are the points that were not good, what are the points that are good, and highlight different opportunities to improve it in our vision. Okay, so after we did all the research, we started to define what does success look like in that vision and set up the context. So tactically, we have a big doc culture at Carta, and we used a document to get everybody aligned on what the project is. So we created a project doc that included these types of aspects: a very clear problem statement, who we are building for, the end user, what is the goal and what does success look like in this vision, and lastly, very key plan with timelines and deliverables. So I'll go into each of these aspects of the vision plan doc. So it's very important to align on the core problem. I don't know if you've heard this story, but this illustration's from a story where there's all these blind men, and they're touching different parts of the elephant. So one will be touching, the tail and think it's a rope, or somebody will be touching the legs and think it's a tree, or somebody will be touching the trunk and think it's a snake. But when you actually step back, you see that's an elephant. And so from that research, we looked at all of the problems that exist today and started to align what is the core theme around here, and what is that core problem that we want to solve in our vision. And then the second step is, who are you building toward? There's so many different types of employees. There's people with lower equity education. There's employees with very advanced equity education that are also maybe angel investors. And depending on who you're building for and what those personas are, the ideal customer experience will be vastly different. So being very clear on who that end user is really important for any vision work. And then we also defined what does success look like. So we defined business and also user metrics. So I have some examples from our project. So one business metric that we want to drive in our vision is we want to increase the volume of traffic to new products where we're upselling them, and also key areas of the experience. And then something called an experience outcome. So that's more of a UX metrics of this vision. And one of them was we wanted employees to navigate Carta to complete their top jobs to be done with ease. So if you don't know what the jobs to be done framework is, most of your customers are using your product or service to complete some job to be done. So for example, if you have a banking app, maybe you're checking how much money you have, or you have a job to be done to withdraw money or transfer money. So we wanted to make sure that when employees went to our platform, they're able to complete these actions with ease. So a way to think about how to create an experience outcome is kind of this framework where you define your end user, the action you're going to take, and then define what that experience outcome is. So I mentioned jobs to be done. There's a lot of jobs to be done in Carta as an employee. You can learn about equity. You can exercise your stock options. You can sell it. You can go from private to IPO. There's a lot of stuff you can do. And how do we make clear of that? Or how do we do that and prioritize it for our vision work? We started to group it into different themes. So we started to see, okay, these are kind of the themes of the jobs to be done, and we're also worked with the product managers to prioritize that. And prioritizing those jobs to be done made it very more clear what our vision was going to be. The next step of our process was ideating. So this goes into solutioning of what that experience could be. This is kind of a recap of what an experience vision is. As I mentioned before, an experience vision is a visual, memorable story to show the future customer experience. And so this is what we started to ideate on. And we approached it different than Airbnb. We didn't use illustrations. We used actual mock-ups. And we wanted to create a proof of concept to illustrate key themes. And when I mean mock-ups, like high-fidelity mock-ups that look like the actual product experience. And we thought if we showed this more tangible experience, people could relate to the vision more. And another thing that we were very clear about is that proof of concept was just using to visualize those themes. Like that wouldn't be the actual screens that would be shipped at the end of the day. We just use visuals to explore concepts. And in the ideation phase, we thought about the aspirational experience. So if you recall before, we created a customer journey map. So we had what the current experience is. So maybe there are some points that are not so great in the customer experience. And we started to think of like, what is that ideal aspirational experience across all those different touch points in the journey? And throughout this process, we went through a process of diverging, meaning we thought about all the different types of solutions possible, so prioritizing quantity over quality, and then we would converge and really drill down. What are the best parts of the experience that we liked when we started thinking about all these solutions? And this process is really important because when you diverge and think about all the different types of blue sky solutions, when you finally end and converge on that one vision, you feel confident. When you go bring it to engineering, when you go bring it to your CTO, CPO, CEO, you don't feel doubts of, oh, maybe I should have explored something else. You can very clearly say, oh, we didn't go with this direction because of X, Y, Z. And then after you kind of designed that proof of concept, we did something called a roadshow, where we want to evangelize that product vision, but also get kind of feedback from key stakeholders. So this is what our roadshow looked like. So we were on the employee platform, and we first started sharing our vision work with the employee and getting all our different teams involved. And we kind of had a presentation for all of the employee platform, getting excitement and buy-in from our engineering team. And this was a really great step because people got really excited. We had been in a culture of versioning and not visioning, and people were really excited. When are we going to build this? This is such an awesome ideal and experience, and it created a lot of excitement. After we shared it with our kind of employee platform team, we then shared it across different teams in Carta. So that included Inc., which is our design system team, Carta X, Investor Services, Carta Total Comp, Public, and our executive team. So these are teams with different interests that also are impacted by the employee experience. So for some tips when you do a roadshow is you really want to tell a good story. So one framework for storytelling is thinking about something called the hero's journey, which you see in a lot of movies. There's a protagonist, and they have some rising action, they have some conflict, but they're ultimately able to overcome it and go through a resolution. So that's how we told the story about our experience vision. We had, a protagonist, such as, for example, Sally. She just joined a startup. This is the first time she's received private equity. How does she navigate that? How does she figure out the education part, make that decision to want to exercise, or later even decide to sell and build wealth over time? Another tip I have with this roadshow is different teams have different incentives, and they're responsible for different parts of that end-to-end journey. So I really tried to customize the presentation into what they care about and foster to what they would want to learn. And it's really important to think about not us versus them. During this process, you can get a lot of pushback from teams, where they'll kind of disagree with parts of the experience, or they'll give feedback of that, like, oh, I don't know if this fits for our use case. And you don't want to create this type of dynamic. This is the type of dynamic that you want to create, where you're designing that vision together, where you're hearing their feedback, and you're thinking, okay, let's work with this team and figure out and flesh out what are the details we're missing? How do we make this fit for your use case? And when you all start to work together, you're able to not only create impact for our employee team, but you're able to create impact at scale. And when you're thinking about scale, you want to think about how do you create things that are force multipliers, so we're not only impacting employee, we're impacting Inc., Carta X, public company, investor experience, et cetera. And then after we did the roadshow, we got a lot of great feedback from our exec team and our different teams and updated this proof of concept for our vision. So it was something that was really cohesive and aligned across all of the different teams. And we wanted to iterate and test this and finally give it to customers to get their feedback. So we did user testing. So we created a proof of concept, which was high-fidelity mock, so it would look like a real product experience. And what we did is we prototyped that experience, and we showed it to different customers and had them complete different tasks throughout that. And through that, we were able to validate, okay, what are the great parts of our experience vision, and what are the parts that we need to improve and kind of tweak. And this is really important because you can always make assumptions of what your customer wants, but it's really good to get real feedback. And this is one of the most important steps, is how do you take this awesome vision work and translate it into actual roadmap items? So one really tip for this that we did is you want to get very close with your product partners who are responsible for that roadmap. So throughout the process, they were really bought in all the way, like from ideation stage to the roadshow. And so we were able to translate that vision we had into different milestones throughout different quarters to go from, how do we go from this blue sky vision to making incremental steps toward that. Another thing, too, that was really great about this vision work is it was a really good communication tool. So when a new person joins Carta and they want to learn about the employee platform, we can show them that vision work. Like, this is where we're headed, and they can see a story of what that end experience could be. And this was also really helpful, even thinking about external stakeholders. So this vision work was so impactful that our director of product would even share it with our board of directors, and they could see this is the future of where the employee experience could be. And I want to end with this quote, which is by Jeff Lawson, the CEO of Twilio. And he said, "Organizations are measured by the customer experience they create at scale for every customer." They don't see the organization chart. They don't see that you have different teams of product managers, designers, and engineers. They just see what is that ideal end-to-end experience. And if you create a great emotional experience that fosters that emotional loyalty, you can be one of the best companies out there. Thank you so much, and feel free to connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and also ask any questions.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep you here on stage
Okay.
just for a couple of questions. My colleague here will actually help us with the microphone. While you're inspired, I'm going to ask you one thing. So I'm working sometimes with engineers, and they don't really care about design. This is always the big issue that I have. And one time I met an engineer who was at some point part of an ad agency, advertising agency. And he learned that there is value in good design. What he shared is that, it's not visible, but we somehow get pleasure from using products which are beautiful and platforms which are beautiful. It somehow pushes loyalty also towards the product. What is in your appearance? Why should we care about design in the first place?
Yeah, I think, take it back to this quote.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know what product design is, but designers, we're responsible for creating great customer experience, right? Like, product managers are a little bit more responsible for like that business impact and driving revenue, but we're here so people enjoy that experience, and we really want to understand our customers, what are their pain points, how can we make their lives better. And if you see that in competitive markets, the best products have a good customer experience, right? You can think about what are your favorite products to use. They're the ones that have a good customer experience. So if in a competitive environment, the best companies have a great customer experience, then you should have design be prioritized, because that's very important to creating a good customer experience.
You were mentioning in your presentation that at some point you actually, you were supposed, or your goal was also to align the other departments and business functions towards this vision that you had for the design. Which department was the hardest to convince or to win?
Are you thinking more like product engineering, that aspect? Actually, it was interesting. We didn't experience much friction between those different, like, product was always on board, and our engineering was really on board, because I think we knew we could do better. Okay. Like, we've heard so many pain points from employees where they don't understand their equity really well, and because they don't understand their equity, they have to pay all these taxes. And we all really cared about, because we were also employees too, so we had empathy, and we all wanted to do better, like create better. I think Carta has a very good growth mindset culture, so I didn't experience any friction there. I think the biggest points of pushback were other teams, right? Trying to understand, how is this going to impact their team? And so that's why I said it's really important to not come from a us versus them, but go from, this is a shared vision. How does this vision empower your team and help you achieve what you want? So we try to individually meet with those teams, understand what's their feedback on the experience, understand what they're trying to drive in terms of the business, and tailor our vision to work toward them. And they would get on board too. They would see how this vision work could drive a lot of impact for their team also.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
Do we have questions in the audience? There is one on the back. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
Would you stand up and maybe also
sorry.
say your name? We can't see you from
Hey.
here. Hey.
I'm Maria Street, and I have a question as a fellow product designer.
Yeah.
Did you have any struggle with product managers when you're when you're talking about roles and responsibilities within the full process? Do you have to convince some of them, for example?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one. There's been research done that shows there's a lot of gray area between the responsibilities of PMs and designers. For example, user research is one that can be overlapped. So I think what helps is developing that personal relationship with your PM and understanding what are kind of their responsibilities they want to own versus you, and that can create better alignment and a greater partnership with product.
Great question, Mary. Thank you. Do we have another one? Then I'm going to ask mine. So creative people are usually also very sensitive. And we know still that there is actually also a lot of science behind user experience. It's not just, oh, this is why, because it's pretty. So how do you deal with all those people maybe in the team who say, well, this shouldn't be blue, it should be pink, and because I like pink better. How do you deal with that? I mean, I sense that in marketing quite often. At some point, I was in a marketing position in a company, and because it's colorful and fun, everyone thought that they can meddle in my work, and they don't understand that there is, certain reasoning and science behind what I'm doing. How do you deal with that in product design?
Yeah, I think a couple things. So our company's relatively bigger, so we have like a little under 2,000 employees. And because of that, we have something called a design system. So a design system is you have all like the different color set of what your brand is, you have the different typography set, you have all the different components, like what does this button look like? You're not going to be designing a new button for every screen. So those UI changes, it's not a debate. You kind of have to explain more about that experience because the actual UI aspects, like what the button color is, pink versus blue, is defined by the design system. And so you would go to the design system for that. Other aspects where people maybe question the design, I like to, when I present my design, explain my rationale. People don't understand, but design is very logical and very tied to like the business outcome and experience outcome. So anything on a screen is intentional. Like I can explain everything from the spacing to the typography to the padding to why like I chose this layout. It's very intentional for what we want to drive. And so when you show your design work, explaining your process and rationale can get people to understand like, oh, okay, this is why. Or if somebody has some feedback like, oh, did you try this? What about this? You can share like, oh, I tried this. It didn't work for X, Y, Z. Or you could also be you can also be very receptive to your ideas because you want to create an inclusive process, and you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. That's a really great idea. Like, let me try out that concept. And I think the third thing is more culturally understanding that design ultimately has the ultimate say on what the design is. So there's something called like a RACI, if you've ever heard it. It's like responsible, accounted, consulted, informed. So it kind of details what people's different responsibilities are. And as a designer, when you have that clear expectation that we're ultimately going to decide what the end design will be, even if we get all this feedback, that helps with making the ultimate decision.
The RACI matrix, we use it in our company as
Oh,
well.
nice.
Julie, thank you so much. It was very cool learning about from your perspective of how you actually designed this in a very logical process. For me, design was always a bit fuzzy, and I think probably also for many in the audience. Let's give a big applause to Julie. You're going to stick around for a while here in Cluj? How long? When do you leave?
I leave Sunday morning, so I have
So-
some more time.
In case you just want to catch up with her on some of the topics, she will be here. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah. Feel free to come up to me at all during the conference if you want to chat. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.